Sky News this week, Theresa May will find that she is drinking in the Last Chance Saloon, and the bad news for her is that the bar is already dry. It is a catch-22 for Theresa. Heads she loses, and tails she loses as well, I think. Beijing's nuclear option, why a US-Chinese war could spiral out of control. Foreign affairs. As China's power has grown in recent years, so too has the risk of war with the United States. Under President Xi Jinping, China has increased its political and economic pressure on Taiwan and built military installations on coral reefs in the South China Sea, fueling Washington's fears that Chinese expansionism will threaten US allies and influence in the region. US destroyers have transited the Taiwan Strait to loud protests from Beijing. American policymakers have wondered aloud whether they should send an aircraft carrier through the strait as well. Chinese fighter jets have intercepted US aircraft in the skies above the South China Sea. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump has brought long simmering economic disputes to a rolling boil. A war between the two countries remains unlikely, but the prospect of a military confrontation resulting, for example, from a Chinese campaign against Taiwan no longer seems as implausible as it once did. And the odds of such a confrontation going nuclear are higher than most policymakers and analysts think. I agree with that. That's why I wrote that piece, War is Coming. The US is now weighing new warship passage through the Taiwan Strait. This is from Reuters. Considering a new operation to send warships through the Taiwan Strait, US officials tell Reuters, a mission aimed at ensuring free passage through the strategic waterway, but which risks heightening tensions with China. The US Navy conducted a similar mission in the Strait's international waters in July, and any repeat would be seen in self-ruled Taiwan as a fresh expression of support by President Trump's government. It is a given he's going to do exactly that. Royal Navy Chief vows to send ships through the South China Sea as well. If you're going to have a different interpretation of that convention to the majority of nations, then that has to be resisted, said Sir Philip in an interview with the Financial Times. Otherwise, you could see right around the world nations who will start to make their own interpretation. They've got to back up their allies. Many years ago, I went to a concert by Orchestral Maneuvers in the Dark, and the song that I recall was Enola Gay. Have a listen, it tends to be in sync with what I'm saying. Thousands are rallied in Taiwan, calling for a referendum on independence from China. This is going to get stoked up as well. Beijing has already been irked by the Taiwanese government's approval for a referendum next month to decide whether to enter future Olympics events as Taiwan rather than Chinese Taipei, the name agreed under a compromise struck in the late 1970s. China's dangerous dollar addiction, foreign policy. The trade war with the United States may soon hit China where it hurts, making it hard for Beijing to satisfy its voracious appetite for natural resources. Every year, China spends roughly $350 billion just to purchase copper, coal, iron ore, aluminium, steel, and crude oil it needs to keep the Chinese economy running. And that bill could grow as China eats through even more raw material to build roads, railways, and ports across Eurasia as part of its Belt and Road Initiative. The problem is that these commodities are traded in dollars, and the transactions are cleared through the US banking system. To buy them, then, Beijing needs to earn an equal amount of dollars by selling its own goods. Yet Washington, by curbing imports from China, for which it usually pays in dollars, and usually to the tune of $500 billion a year, is slowly limiting the number of greenbacks Beijing can get its hands on. Take you back to the 15th of October, where I said US Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer and Peter Navarro have operated with surgical precision and have introduced an anti-dragon clause. Trump's trade war with China is at the beginning of the beginning, according to a source in Axios. Have a read. Shanghai is on its track for its best day since March 2016. It's up about 4% when I looked last. China, and the reason is China's outlined plans for sweeping overhaul to its income tax regime. Details are in this link from David Inglis. Let's move on to the events around Turkey and Saudi Arabia. This is stunning. If this account by Turkish media is true and they release the evidence, very difficult to see MBS surviving this. Right before Jamal Khashoggi was murdered, MBS spoke to him on the phone and demanded his return to Riyadh. Jamal refused, so he was murdered. Hervé, coming from a mythomaniac regime, I am really not surprised of the absurdity of this communique. The KSA is the only country on earth where one still needs to clarify the truth. The transparency of the Saudi lie about Khashoggi's death was a test. Now they know Trump will let them get away with murder. Statement on the case of the disappearance of the Saudi citizen Jamal bin Ahmed Khashoggi. This is from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Have a read. When the Crown Prince visited the United States earlier this year, he was feted in Hollywood and Silicon Valley, on Wall Street, and of course by the Trump White House as a messiah. That's why I keep putting up that painting of Salvatore Mundi. And on that note, The Second Coming by William Butler Yeats, probably the most popular poem of all time. Turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer, things fall apart, the centre cannot hold, mere anarchy is loosed upon the world, the blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. Surely some revelation is at hand, surely the second coming is at hand. The second coming, hardly are those words out, when a vast image out of Spiritus Mundi troubles my sight. Somewhere in sands of the desert, a shape with a lion body and the head of a man. A gaze blank and pitiless as the sun is moving its slow thighs, while all about it, real shadows of the indignant desert birds. The darkness drops again, but now I know the 20 centuries of stony sleep were vexed in nightmare by a rocking cradle. And what rough beast, its hour come round at last, slouches towards Bethlehem to be born? Have a look at this interview with Badra Punchline. He's the ex-ambassador to Turkey, Badra Kumar, on Jamal Khashoggi and the future of the West. It's an excellent interview. I've been following him for a long time. He really is a very intuitive and incisive analyst. After the meeting, Crown Prince Mohammed told confidants that Kushner had discussed the names of Saudis disloyal to the Crown Prince. This is another penny that's going to drop. Why the outrage, MBS asked in English in a call to Kushner. He was really shocked that there was such a big reaction to it. He feels betrayed by the West. He said he would look elsewhere and will never forget how people turned against him before evidence was produced. The real reason Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman wanted Khashoggi dead or alive, Daily Beast. He's responsible for a gruesome murder, just as Henry II was responsible for the murder of Thomas à Becket, when he said, "Who will rid me of this meddlesome priest?" In this case, a meddlesome journalist. Vidino traces the Saudis' intense hostility towards the Brotherhood. This journalist was close to the Brotherhood, to the uprisings that swept through much of the Arab world in 2011. The Saudis, together with the Emiratis, saw it as a threat to their own power. Mohammed bin Salman became Deputy Crown Prince bin Nayef's position between the king and his favorite son clearly was untenable. As one Saudi close to the royals put it, between the onion and the skin, there is only the stink. What drives MBS is a ruthless effort toward total control, domestically and regionally. He is the Putin of the desert, says Bodine. He has basically broken the back of the princelings, the religious establishment and the business elite, brought all ministries and agencies of power under his sole control. I alone can fix it, and jailed, killed, or put under house arrest activists and any and all potential as well as real opposition, including his mother. Another world leader in a state TV bubble, initially the king, was unaware of the extent of the crisis. That was partly because MBS aides had been directing the king to glowing news about the country on Saudi TV channels. The irony of it all is this wannabe king is in line to be the custodian of the two holy mosques, a title that signifies Saudi Arabia's jurisdiction over mosques in Mecca and Medina. I wrote, events in Saudi Arabia signaling loud and clear that its wannabe king is simply not tenable, that he was already unconscionable, I know. And this, I think, is his philosophy, and this is what he said about the Yemen. We want to leave a huge impact on the consciousness of coming generations of Yemenis, and we want their children and women, indeed their men, to shiver every time Saudi Arabia is mentioned. Yesterday's New York Times, what a PR disaster for Saudi Arabia. That's from Borzu. Sheikh Yamani, this is an old interview that Fawz Khalid posted, talks about the oil weapon. Have a listen. A few years ago, I wrote about the OPEC go-go days of Sheikh Yamani, his prayer beads and Delphic pronouncements. Since spy plane downing Russia toughened stance against Israel and Syrian skies, Putin now has leverage over Israel and has no reason to give it up. Downing a Russian plane, Israel fears Putin will clip its wings in Syria. As far as I'm aware, they have not done a single sortie over Syria since those S-300s were delivered. As I said, on the 24th of September, Netanyahu left Putin with no option. He either had to shut out Netanyahu over Syrian airspace or shut up. He chose to shut him out. France says the planned EU Commission mechanism to enable Iran trade may have a wider use. So that's that special purpose vehicle I referred to previously. Steve Mnuchin said that the US Treasury was already in negotiations with SWIFT, which intermediates the bulk of the world's cross-border dollar-denominated transactions on disconnecting Iran from the network. And then I'll leave you with one final quote that I came across: world history as we know it was written by the victors.